America's cold civil war showed up at the doorstep of Rhode Island native Ian Pryor. Like many school districts across the country, Loudon County leftists want to introduce critical race theory to unsuspecting students. And again, concerned parents are not welcome. How far will the left go to eliminate any and all opposition? Loudon County radicals have something to teach all of us. Ian shows up on Good Men today to discuss what his otherwise normal neighbors have dared to do. We talk about anti-racism, actual racism, cancel culture, and critical race theory. And also toss around some overall good political banter, including Ian's latest project, dailymalarkey.com. Come check it out.
Here is a book that I think ought to be in every home library.
You see, a woman who is single at age 40, having spent 10 or 20 years raising children, is really not quite the same as a man of age 40 who's been working continuously for 20 years.
This should be the show. This is the show.
What?
This. Just talk.
But it's clear through these tapes, it's clear through Planned Parenthood's own numbers that they're not about health care, they're about abortion. That's their thing.
Look at this lead pencil. There's not a single person in the world who could make this pencil. Remarkable statement? Not at all.
You are a liar.
Radical meaning not just extreme politics, what they believe in, but how far they're willing to go to win elections. And thuggery, lying and cheating and stealing are things that they've proven over and over again that they're willing to do.
We mustn't kid ourselves into thinking that the communists have placed their agitators only into the black communities. They're working both sides of the street. They want hatred, violence, and bloodshed between the races, and they don't care how they get it or whom they use, even children if necessary.
You're black or you're white, you're Latino or you're transsexual, you're homosexual or whatever. You're a group. You're a member of a group.
The British government wasn't stabbing us in the gut with bayonets. They were oppressing us with taxes and regulations. That's what we meant by tyranny 250 years ago.
I want the people of America to be able to work less for the government and more for themselves. This is the chief meaning of freedom.
I think we're talking at cross purposes.
Eternal law is the mind of God. The natural law is a participation in eternal law or a reflection of it.
All that is necessary for the triumph of evil is that good men do nothing.
See if you can be some kind of hero. Make the suffering in the world less.
This is the show, and we're not going to change it.
They code it in the language of racial equity, but in reality, it's just a power play.
Yeah. Hey, let's start there. You know, if you have an hour, we have plenty of time to kind of really, reach out and touch all these tangential issues and all that. But I wanted to start with this, and we'll start recording right now. Okay. I want my audience to kind of like catch up with you. You and I go back like 10 years. I'm doing the Young Republicans, and we were hanging around. I was more on the activist side. The way I remember is you were kind of in dealing with campaigns and running campaigns. Mm-hmm. Then that fizzles out because we get a little older. And where do you go? You end up down in Washington. You take a job with the Republican Party.
Yeah,
and
that's right. So after the
past few years,
So after the Doherty campaign, I went down. I got a job at the National Republican Congressional Committee. I ended up being the comms person for the Northeast region. So that includes New England, New York, Pennsylvania, down to West Virginia. And so I was there for the 2014 cycle. We had a fantastic cycle in 2014. I think we picked up 13 seats, and a lot of those were in the Northeast. New York, we did well. Pennsylvania, we took out Nick Rahal in West Virginia, which, as you know, West Virginia used to be a blue state. It still has mainly Democrats, but it's now the most conservative state in the country. Mm-hmm. And so then after 2014, I got promoted there to be the national spokesperson, stuck around to help finish up a special election in New York City and Staten Island. And then I went over to American Crossroads to be the communications director there. Crossroads was in an interesting place because it had primarily been, a Rove outfit that focused on a combination of Senate races and presidential races, but it morphed into the Senate Leadership Fund, which was, affiliated with Majority Leader McConnell at the time. And I stayed there for the 2016 cycle. Again, we had, an unexpectedly good result. It's funny, I went into the election night party in 2016 that we had at a bar in DC, and I had my computer with me, and I'd written up two statements based on, what our polling showed us, right? And one of the statements was based on Hillary Clinton wins the presidency, Republicans keep the Senate. The second statement was Hillary Clinton wins the presidency, Republicans lose the statement. I think it was about 10 o'clock at night after it looked like, Ron Johnson's going to win Wisconsin and Trump might win Wisconsin. I was like, well, I guess I got to write a new statement. And it took us until 2 p.m. and 2 a.m. and then we sent it out. And then from there, I started out at the Department of Justice as the Principal Deputy Director of Public Affairs almost as soon as Sessions was confirmed in March. I stayed there for right up until late summer 2018. I went to Mercury Public Affairs, did about a year there, and then started my own public affairs shop in 2019, which has been very successful. But as of recently, we've started to sort of open up a bunch of different ventures. We started this newsletter called thedailymalarkey.com, and what we try and do is, with a bit of humor, but also substance, poke fun at big media, big tech, cancel culture, and try and weave in, sort of the Barstool, Outkick, Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, well, I like how you said, you want to deal with the ideas head on. You want to argue with these people, but you can't forget that these people need to be ridiculed as well. I mean, the cancel culture, every day you see something that's canceled now or whatever, and it deserves a little bit of ridicule.
And that's really the thing is, it's useless when you see these people on Twitter or Facebook. It's useless to get in arguments with them because, you only have a certain amount of time in your day to sit there obsessing over fighting with these people on Facebook. And if you're trying to get into serious conversations on Facebook, it just ends badly. It's not a good place to do it. I mean, the place to do it is, in your front yard or, at a party where you're talking to people rationally face to face. Problem is a lot of these, as I call them, Facebook fascists, they're afraid to step out of their digital matrix and actually have a debate with you. Everything they do is online.
Well, it's classic liberalism, right? We've always known that the reason they act the way they do, when you kind of start experiencing this stuff in college, a lot of us, where that hardcore political correctness, once you start confronting it a little bit and looking into it, it's, these people have no substance. It's a lot of groupthink, and you start gaining a lot of confidence once you kind of step into that realm and say, well, I think this. Once you start arguing, liberals become this empty shell. And at least that was my experience. And, I talked to a lot of people who are just like, yeah, I mean, they're not that sophisticated. There's a lot more intellectualism on the right. But the liberals have this reputation, probably because, they're in the media and they took over the colleges. So I think they have this unfortunate reputation of being like the intellectuals in society. But you're the one who, in your op-ed, your recent op-ed, is just like, listen, this is not how you're supposed to act. It's not that profound, but in a world that's crazy, you have to remind people that what we do in a civilized society is, you don't like what I said, write your own op-ed. I took the time to research, analyze, put my name out there in the paper. Instead of just calling me a racist or go down the litany of things that you do, put in your own effort. There's so much more effort and intellectualism on our side. The culture is superior, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting too, and we've sort of noticed this trend, is you're getting more traditional liberals like Glenn Greenwald or Matt Taibbi or Barry Weiss that are starting to speak out on this. So usually it was just conservatives, but now it's getting bigger, right? I mean, you look at the Teen Vogue story with Alexi McCammon. Now, look, I think Alexi McCammon, maybe she engaged in cancel culture herself. But it's just absurd that, this young African-American woman who is successful, who got a job at Axios, one of the top media companies in the country, and then goes to Teen Vogue as editor-in-chief, and then they cancel her because of some tweet she did like 10 years ago when she was 17. Like, I didn't have Twitter when I was 17. I didn't have Facebook when I was 17. I'm glad I didn't. But what would people have said, in 1994 if they had access to Twitter and Facebook? Ask yourself that question, right? They would be in the same boat. So you have this younger generation that has been roped into this social media ecosystem that don't quite have the judgment they should because they're teenagers, and that's gonna ruin them for the rest of their lives. Meanwhile, people on the left are sitting there saying, well, you know, you may have committed a serious crime and gone to jail for 30 years because of it, but you know, we shouldn't cancel you because of that, and we should make sure that we get you jobs and we get you that's fine if that's your opinion, great. But then you can't say to somebody, well, you exercised your free speech, you did it in a dumb way, but we're going to ruin your career forever now.
A decade later. And that's how, as I recall, that's how the term cancel culture came about. It was really kind of looking back at old social media posts from years ago and saying, well, you're fired now. You know, a lot of times it was like, when I was a teenager, you know, the girl who lost her spot on the cheerleading squad at the University of whatever.
Yeah, that's in this county.
Yeah, they revoked her acceptance. You know, and a lot of times, you know, you and I will look at what was said, and there's no clear, offense there. A lot of times it's just racist because everything's racist. Like the Dr. Seuss books. I actually took the time to read 2 or 3 of those, and you have to strain yourself, at least the ones I read, to find the racial imagery that caused them to be outraged and cancel those books. But we got to get quickly into, you're in Loudon County now.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, this is an amazing story, you know, reading the details of it, even in these times when we should expect what happened. But basically, there's a parent Facebook group that's private, and they're trying to institute, or they already have instituted, critical race theory into the public schools. And you've got two or three young daughters, right?
2 daughters, yeah.
This is just you being a concerned parent, not Republican Ian Pryor.
Right.
Just like, listen, what am I? And in a few years, I'm going to be, this is maybe why I'm interested, because in a few years, I have to start looking at the public schools. And right now, I'm kind of lucky that my boys are young, but I almost feel like I'm reminded of, remember the Joker, Jack Nicholson, wait till they get a load of me. Like I could see myself stepping in just like you, going to the board meetings, writing something in the local paper. And that's what you did. And you get put on a like McCarthyism type list in the county. Among other people.
Yeah. And so, I mean, just to kind of back it up a little bit, I had, I think in the fall, I sort of, after the George Floyd thing happened, right, you had people just going nuts for different reasons, right? And obviously it was national news all the time, different sides, a lot of different contexts that I think people don't necessarily understand, right? They look at the headlines, they don't look at all the videos, they don't look at all they don't understand how police reform works or lawsuits against police departments work. That's something I dealt with when I was at the Department of Justice. But, I started wondering to myself, are they on to something? What is it that we're talking about here? So I went down the rabbit hole, right? I read Robin DiAngelo, White Fragility. I read Ibram Kendi, How to Be an Anti-Racist. I read a book by, former Patriots tight end Ben Watson. And then I also read a bunch of stuff by Martin Luther King. And then as that is all happening, right, Chadwick Boseman dies. Black Panther, right? Love him. Great actor. So I started watching all his movies. And, I watched Jackie Robinson, 42, and I was like, this is such a great story. And, what I came through with this whole like sort of equity, equality thing is a bit of an analogy on Jackie Robinson. So, equity is, or equality is, we're going to give everybody the equal opportunity to succeed, right? Colorblind meritocracy. Whereas equity is, we are going to right-size results so that we have consistency of outcome. So let's take the Jackie Robinson story as an example that I think clarifies the difference between equality and equity. Now, in an equitable system, Branch Rickey would say, look, I just want to integrate Major League Baseball. So I need to find an African-American baseball player to put on the team. Anyone that's pretty decent will do, right? But that's not what he did. He's like, look, I want to help integrate Major League Baseball, but I want to do it in a way where I get the best and the toughest baseball player out there that's also going to help me win the pennant. That's what he wanted to do, and he gets Jackie Robinson. Now, if he had just had somebody that was okay, who knows how that would have worked out. But instead, he gets arguably, the biggest hero in American pro sports to go out there, take all the heat, become the MVP of the league, and eventually lead the Brooklyn Dodgers to a World Series title. And now Jackie Robinson's number is the only one that's retired all across the league. So equity versus equality. Equality, we get Jackie Robinson. Equity, it may have taken years to integrate Major League Baseball. So this is all going through my mind.
That's a really good example. I mean, because you can imagine going the other way and doing some sort of affirmative action into Major League Baseball, and then these a lot like the controversy over blacks and failing out of these high level colleges. No one can understand why. It's because the affirmative action policies have ended up hurting these, like the black dropout rate at some of these universities. That doesn't do them any good by getting into college, just by giving them an extra tick because of their skin color, and then they end up failing out. And then where are they? But you can imagine the old white bigotry in America looking at that black players play who just thrown in there for equity's sake. And then did you really help the liberal cause there? Doing it the right way. And I love the equity and equality thing, because a lot of people are not seeing that slippage of language. It's a lot like the Antifa, it's that Orwellian thing. You can guarantee that if liberals are saying anti-fascist, anti-racist, it's the complete opposite of that. And because no one can obfuscate like them. And I think it's a really good mission to start pointing out how often they say equity now instead of equality.
Exactly. And so I started doing a little research on what was going on in the schools. People started sending me some things, and I actually, just for fun, I FOIA'd the contracts they had with what's called the Equity Collaborative out in California. And I found out they spent close to $500,000 on this consulting team to come in and do focus groups in the schools. And the focus groups were, they only picked parents based on race. So they excluded the majority of Loudon County from these focus groups on equity in schools. I'm like, well, that seems unconstitutional to me. So I pitched that a couple of places. And then next thing you know, you had the school department proposing a conduct policy for teachers, saying that you cannot speak out against our commitment to equity either in school or outside of school. Meaning, like, if you're talking to your neighbors and you say, yeah, I don't really like what they're doing, it's not my philosophy, I believe in a colorblind meritocracy, well, then you could be subject to discipline. So we highlight that. I get a couple of stories written about that, because it's a clear First Amendment violation. Then I go to the school board and I speak up about that, right? And then I wrote this op-ed on really kind of collecting all this information and putting it in the Federalist. Now, fast forward to last week, I find out from the reporter who was writing this story that I was on the list, this blacklist of people that were put on this list in this private Facebook group. And the person that created the list was asking for help, like exposing them by, mailings to their neighbors and hacking their computers, hacking their websites, which is a federal crime, right? So, I had gotten put on the list twice. Once because of my quote unquote First Amendment concerns that I expressed at the school board. And I'll get to that in a second. And then the second one was for the op-ed in the Federalist. Now, what's amazing is that the person that named me for writing the op-ed in the Federalist was a neighbor. And this neighbor has, she's someone that's always on Facebook calling conservatives racist, fascist, sexist, whatever ist will do. And, I had gone back
all the stuff we're used to. Yep.
Yeah. And I really don't comment on Facebook, but at one point, she said something where it was, you people who hide behind your thin blue line flags. And I just said, look, I mean, social media is not really a great way to have these debates. People have different perspectives based on their own experiences. It's far better to have these conversations in person. Happy to talk to you. You know where I live. And she deletes the comment. Which says it all, right? Like you don't want to seem like
I mean, dealing with people in a reasonable way exposes their irrationality, and that's perfect.
Totally. And so then eventually she sent her husband over to talk to me. Like, she couldn't show up herself, and I had a pretty civil debate with the guy. Like, I didn't agree with a lot of the stuff he said, but there was no harsh words, no raised voices. I mean, it was a nice porch debate, having a beer, and talked for about a half hour, and that was last August, and that was the end of it. And I haven't spoken to these people since. And then I find out that they're putting me on this list. But I think what the ironic part for me is that it really motivated me. It motivated me to get out there and sort of shine a light on this. It's like, all right, you're going to come after my business. that's great, but maybe you don't know what business I'm in, because this is only going to help me speak for all the people that you want to, you know, pressure on your street or in your job or in your community to do what you think is right. I can go out, I can speak on it, I can bring national attention to it, and I'm going to turn the tables. And now I'm like, look, I'll keep talking on this because I think it's a fight worth having. It's not just a fight for, you know, our country's future, but when you're talking about schools, it's a fight for our kids' future. Yeah,
I just think you have to face it head on, and it is something to take seriously. These people, you know, leftists, as I refer to them, you know, liberals, or whatever term we want to refer to them as, they're really leftists. Obviously, they're not these classical liberals anymore. Right. It's not a joke. These people don't mess around anymore. That, you know, people are getting fired, you know, for something that they said that they thought was benign, for an old tweet. There was a coach / teacher that just got fired for doing exactly what you did, questioning critical race theory, which is, man, we're not even really getting into what critical race theory is. And I guess we should, you know, right after this, you know, explain what that is for the audience, but it's a racist doctrine. It's neo-communist racism, you know, and I think we win that argument. You know, that sounds a little maybe hyperbolic, but that's pretty much what it is. And these people don't mess around. They put you on a list, and they said, you know, this is one of the screenshots. Someone said, does anyone know any hackers? Meaning they want to hack your website and get in there and screenshot and dox you. Then someone wrote, this is a call for volunteers to combat the anti-CRT, critical race theory, activities of these folks, the stop whatever website, they name your website and the like. Looking for folks who are interested in volunteering to organize, lead, execute, and donate. 2, gather information on you. Community mailing list, lists of folks who are in charge of the anti-CRT movement, list of local lawmakers and folks in charge of the movement. Infiltrate, create fake online profiles and join these groups to collect and communicate information. Hackers who can either shut down their websites or redirect them to pro-CRT and anti-racist informational web pages. Spread information, expose these people publicly, create online petitions, create counter mailings. These are screenshots of their plan to get you. And we know that they've gotten people before.
And you know, Travis, you know what the ironic thing about all of this is? You know, there's probably a list of criminal activity or statutes, criminal laws that they've either bumped up against or have completely crossed. But the one that is so hilarious to me is 18 USC 241. It's called Conspiracy Against Rights. It's if 2 or more persons conspire to injure, oppress, threaten, or intimidate any person in the free exercise or enjoyment of any right or privilege secured to him by the Constitution or laws of the United States, or because of his having so exercised the same. So basically, people conspiring to intimidate somebody to stop them from exercising their First Amendment rights, or because they exercise their First Amendment rights. Now, 18 USC 241, that's one of the Ku Klux Klan acts.
Okay.
Okay. So they're out there in the name of, you know, and we call them out here Chardonnay Antifa. But, you know, the anti-racists of Loudon County are out there violating Ku Klux Klan acts. And one person who put me on there is dumb enough to make the case by saying the reason why I should be put on a list is for First Amendment concerns.
Yeah.
I mean, can you be any dumber than that? And that's the problem, is these people are so, you know, I'm sure they're intelligent people in their day-to-day lives, but they've become so radicalized by, you know, the social media, the echo chamber, what big tech feeds them on a regular basis, with probably a spice of, you know, foreign disinformation campaigns in there, that they cannot think 3 steps ahead of what they're doing and say, hey, you know, maybe we should, if we're preaching tolerance, maybe there's a better way to do that. And that comes back to my point from last week's op-ed, which is, yeah, look, maybe you're right. I don't know. I'm not the king of righteousness here. I can't tell you what's right and wrong in these things. I have my opinion. And the way that you counter that opinion is to tell me where I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Tell me where I'm wrong. Publish a counter op-ed. You know, let's have a debate. Let's have civil means of discussion, not through, you know, the digital matrix where it's just a giant pile on and, you know, it really doesn't change anything.
Yeah, Ian, I mean, there were 3 things I wrote down about your op-ed, which we'll link to everything. One was very simply, it's not profound, you didn't come up with it, but open debate. If you have a problem with what I said, just write a counter op-ed. Let the marketplace of ideas work. That's I mean, that's how you act in a civilized society. The two was, we'll get into what anti-racism really is. The third one you said is that this culture, this cancel culture, is coming for you. And that's one of the things. So, I've always known we were like-minded just because the Republican Party or whatever, but reading your op-ed, I realized, like, okay, Ian knows what leftism is. He knows what this progressive culture is all about. He knows that you use the word radical, which is dead on. And you write, cancel culture is coming for you, whether you know it or not. It's not about your worldview. It's about radicalizing everyday people whose inner turmoil will be directed at you. And this is what I try to get across to people about the left and the right, the Democrats and the Republicans. For all intents and purposes, I have my problems with the Republican Party, but for all intents and purposes, it's still comprised of normal people. It's still got that Americana, proud of your country. Most people who are not racist, not anti-racist, they're trying to get on with their lives, and they vote on election day, and things like that, and go to work and all that other stuff. The Democratic Party, I almost feel like you're touching on, is that just the people within the party, your neighbors, are becoming radicals. It's not professors. It's not just Don Lemon anymore. It's average, ordinary people. Your aunts and uncles and your neighbors have this twinge of radicalism in them. And maybe it's because the universities and the educational system were so successful because you thought they'd grow up. You thought they'd start paying taxes and become conservatives, the old adage. But no, the indoctrination is so deep, and they are liberals down to their heart now. And this type of crap, this anti-racism, this equity, makes sense when it goes through their head. That's the way they filter it. Is that I hope I'm not putting words in your mouth, but that's how I read.
I mean, that's right. And I think, one of the interesting developments here is, and I've seen it over the past week, this kind of behavior, it does happen on both sides, right? And so, I've heard about some of the people that were creating this list, or now receiving threats and all that kind of stuff. Like, that's not cool either, right? Do not do what they do. We have a free and open system, at least for now. We might as well take advantage of it. So, for example, I found out that the person that I was put on the list by, before the story came out, I put out a funny tweet that was, shot, write an op-ed in the Federalist on critical race theory and LCPS, Chaser, find out your neighbor put you on a list for, to be targeted with illegal activities. Guess I won't be going to the cookie party this year. And I screenshot the solicitation for hacking, and then I screenshot the thing on where she put me out there. And, I'm hearing that she's saying that I threatened her. I'm like, first of all, you cannot read that as a threat. Yeah. Second of all, yeah, I agree. If somebody is threatening you because of that, look, that's wrong too. And that's exactly what, the left is doing. So, as I go through this and as we continue to fight this, it needs to be fought with civility, but intelligence and organization. And really, I think that these folks, the anti-racists, the Loudon County, Chardonnay, Antifa, they really provided an opportunity, because critical race theory, as we'll talk about, it's tough for the average person that, maybe doesn't care about this stuff and just wants to watch March Madness to understand. But what they do understand is cancel culture. That's something that people get, and whether it's political, whether it's personal. And so they basically took an issue that's a little bit confusing and a little bit out of most people's, sort of mental headspace, and brought it right in there. And then, the next part of this story, which hasn't even really been talked about, is the fact that in addition to listing people that were concerned with critical race theory, they also started listing people that wanted to reopen schools in Loudon County, which creates a whole new opportunity to sort of create a coalition that's nonpartisan, really, because you don't have to be Republican to want to open schools and have your kids go to school. Democrats want that too. And if they think that, hey, look, wait a minute. So if you want to open schools, the anti-racist people are coming after you because you're not equitable. And I'll just read this. I'll read this tweet from a principal in Loudon County who really makes that connection in a scary way. He says, pushing for children to be back in inequitable schools in the name of equity data shows that families pushing for reopening are not the marginalized group people claim are the reason for reopening. Co-opting equity for convenience, equity isn't new. Where have you been? I mean, first of all, I'm not even sure I understand exactly what that tweet is, but it seems to me that he's basically saying we can't reopen schools because of equity. And that's where this turns into. You create these radicals that say, it's my way or the highway, and I am literally spending all my time online listening to these arguments. And if schools are inequitable, then we can't open schools because of equity.
Or the world,
whatever that means, I don't know. But
yeah, the world isn't perfect yet. We can't move forward until we get it perfect. That might just be another, like the teachers unions just trying to squeeze every ounce of advantage out of COVID-19 that they can before they kind of agree to go back. And but the thing about anti-racism, well, first, in your opinion, or define critical race theory as you understand it.
Yeah, so and this is a bit of a long answer, but critical race theory is basically an offshoot of postmodernism, right? Which is a French philosophy after World War II, where they said our institutions have failed us. Over the past 30 years, millions of people are dead because of our political institutions. And it had nothing to do with race at that point in time. It was just looking at our institutions. How do we remake our institutions from the ground up to prevent the carnage that we've seen over the past 30 years? From there, developed a bunch of different sort of, post-colonial theory, queer theory, trans theory, right? And critical race theory.
Yeah.
And so critical race theory takes that concept and says, everything is inherently systemically racist because it was built by, white male capitalists over the course of however long, not just in America, but, in the Enlightenment in Europe and beyond. And so we need to change institutions. We need to change cultural norms. We need to change language. And we also need to tell people that it's not enough to be not racist. It's not enough to believe in a colorblind meritocracy, because that's not going to get it done, in our opinion. So if you're not with us, then you're against us. And we need to convert you to become anti-racist activists to achieve equity, which is the same outcomes, right? Equality is we give everybody the same opportunity and we let them compete to get to, see who's best, right? Equity is no. Everybody has to have the same result. So it's really socialism.
Yeah.
And, you see this when we talk about changing language. You can't say this anymore. You can't say this anymore. You can't have Dr. Seuss. You can't have To Kill a Mockingbird. Now we have to redo the schools. We have to redo government. We have to redo all these things. And then we've created this army of activists who really haven't figured out what it is that they're doing. They're just buying into the language that comes from the Ibram Kendis of the world and filters up to the politicians who are, maybe they believe it. Maybe Joe Biden believes this stuff, or maybe he's just doing what people tell him to do so that he doesn't lose that far left base of activists that are going to go out there and fight for him. I mean, it happens on both sides, right? You don't condemn people that are on your side when you're in politics. And as a result, you kind of have to own what they say. And that just,
Going back to what you said about they don't really know what they're doing, they just know they have to tear it down. I mean, that's the mark of a radical. I mean, revolutionaries are people who have a vision for what they want afterward. Radicals are, we just know this is wrong, racist, burn it down, we'll figure it out afterward. And of course, the strong man ends up building up, the new programs afterward. And that's kind of what I meant by, and I read this to you earlier. One of these people in this Facebook group, I think she's a teacher. She might be an administrator. She said, an educator in a system of oppression is either a revolutionary or an oppressor. So like you were saying, she's saying it's not enough anymore to be for equality. It's not enough anymore to be just a white guy who's not racist and otherwise pretty liberal. It's not enough because anti-racism is a leftist offensive. It's a war. And it's almost an abandonment of the Martin Luther King adage that, the content of your character and not the color of your skin. And the left has almost abandoned that embarrassingly. I don't even think they pretend anymore that MLK is that they agree with at least that part of his famous message. They basically are saying that you're with us or against us, like you said. And it reminds me of the Providence City Councilwoman, total radical. And I'm forgetting her name, but like I confronted her several months ago when she called all of Providence College racist for partying when COVID was, in the mix. And it was like, well, listen, you can say that partying during COVID, we're a bunch of college kids, is irresponsible, but where does this racism charge come out? And she got a lot of heat for it. And she finally had to defend herself. And I listened really carefully to her, and I read her op-ed in the paper. And she said, how could these white kids, because Providence College is mostly white school, be partying when they're in the midst of downtown Providence, where a lot of minorities live? And don't you know that they're mostly affected by COVID? And basically what she was saying was, I said racist because it's not enough anymore to just live your life. And when you encounter someone we consider to be a victim, to treat them fairly. There is a war going on, and you're not being anti-racist enough. And it was several months ago when I started realizing what anti-racist really meant. It doesn't mean anti-racist at all. It means start judging people and treating people differently by the color of their skin. And the whole thing for me, what was it, like a month ago when the New York Times and CDC endorsed giving white people the vaccine last? Because you do all the numbers, and white people live 3 years longer than blacks on average. White people have had it. I mean, that's how far it's come. I mean, they're not even ashamed to say it. It's the New York Times.
I think it went even beyond that, because there was they talked about prioritizing equitable distribution of vaccines over distributing vaccines to seniors, right?
Yeah. Like, so a white old guy, forget about it.
Yeah, it's certainly something. And I want to go back to what I thought was interesting. I mentioned Chadwick Boseman, and when he died, it was sort of right after the George Floyd things. It was pretty shocking. I mean, he was young. You're like, geez, how did he do all those movies where he's doing all this insane stuff with stage 4 colon cancer? But you go back and you watch the movie Black Panther, and it's just phenomenal how it's done. It's basically the hero. Black Panther is very much like the Martin Luther King type, right? He has opportunities to, engage in violence in sort of public, and he's like, nope, don't do it. He's the king of this like fantastically advanced country, and they're like, we're going to show people how advanced we are. We're going to prove to people how we've gotten where we are. Whereas the other guy, Killmonger, is all about activism, violence, taking the weapons from this country and then shipping them to the rest of the world for revolution. And so it's almost, if you look at the character of Black Panther, it's colorblind meritocracy, and the character of Killmonger, the villain, is anti-racism. I mean, that in and of itself is a nutshell right there in, one of the top grossing movies of all time.
So Hollywood accidentally, which they often do, put out a conservative theme movie. Yeah. I read, oh man, I'll have to link this in, when I post this interview. There was a great article years ago about that Hollywood, most of the conservative themes that come out of Hollywood in these movies accidentally are in comic book type movies, like a Batman. Because to the liberal, it's not real. Like conservatism work in the real world, but comic book heroes like Superman and Batman, all of a sudden you start seeing contrast of good and evil and things like that. It was a really good article. I'll try to put that in.
That's that point exactly. So if you remember back in 2012, where Romney was running for president, and Bain Capital was the big news, right? That was the big hit on him, and it was the same summer that The Dark Knight Rises came out by Christopher Nolan. And Bane is the bad guy. So you had all these sort of leftist people talking about Christopher Nolan's message is this secret coded message about Bane. Now, Christopher Nolan, as I understand, is conservative. And if you actually watch The Dark Knight Rises, it is about socialism run amok, right? I mean, they're holding trials, they're hanging people, they're putting them out on the ice. It's insane. Go rewatch that movie. It is a commentary on what happens when socialism runs amok and takes over a society.
Yeah, I thought The Hunger Games, which is a very fantastical kind of fairy tale type of imagine that type of world. I thought that was that strong federal government where everyone is kind of like where you live, Loudon County, like people just not living in the real world. What's that? Is that kind of like living on the east side, except a bigger space? How many like hate has no home here signs are in people's front lawns there?
You know what? It's actually not like that. In fact, so I did Tucker on this last week. And I mean, like I came back and it was like a hero's welcome. And I think part of that is a personal thing. I think, the neighbor involved has tried to cancel others that, aren't necessarily Republicans, and some may be on her side. So, I think largely most of the people in Loudoun County are, rational people that have their beliefs, but don't go to such extreme measures to target people that don't share those beliefs. Our best friends across the street, some of our best friends, they're liberal, and we talk about this stuff all the time, and it never ends up in a fight. And if it gets close to the point where, it's like, look, we're just not going to be able to bridge this here on a Saturday night, we'll talk about something else, right? I mean, that's like normal conversation that you have with people that you disagree with. Yeah. And I think most people out here are like that, but you just have some radicals, and it's being pushed by the school board. It's being pushed downstream from the governor's office in Virginia, the Secretary of Education, and a lot of people out here are getting gaslit by this stuff. And you throw in sort of the national political media ecosystem, and that's the problem. And this is also a lesson in how much more important local politics are than national politics.
Yeah, well,
this is not. Go ahead.
So my concern is, I think a lot about the narrative of, white cops hunting, blacks after the George Floyd. Most people in this country, or a lot of liberals anyway, really believe the narrative that, the cops are out there really mistreating, if not hunting, black suspects or just black people in general. And the way that we live in the social media algorithm world, where you see 5 videos within 2 months of a bad incident happening with a cop, and that can convince you that you're in the midst of an epidemic. Okay, I've seen headline after headline after headline. I don't want to be as deranged as liberals, is what I'm saying. I know I live in my algorithm world, and I get headlines from, I can get caught in that group thing too, because of the outlets that I follow on social media. How widespread is this? So it's in Loudon County. You're confronting it there. How many school districts, because I tend to think it's real, because we know that leftists and liberals are activists by nature. They go to college and they go into these fields like education and media. But I don't want to be so deluded and just think like, oh, don't send your kid to public schools because you know what they're teaching them there. Is it an epidemic of critical race theory and just like radical leftism inside all these school systems, or is it half, or is it not as bad as I think? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a good point, right? Because you see, on one hand, on one side, you're seeing all this news and these headlines, and on the other side, you see the headlines that are going to, rattle people, right? Like San Francisco spending more time and money renaming schools than opening schools, such to the point where their leftist mayor has to blast them for it. You've got in Alexandria here, there's a school called Thomas Jefferson. And I would assume it's not going to be called that for much longer. Right. And it's a merit-based gifted school, and you basically would take tests to get in there. And ultimately, what happens? You would have a high percentage of Asians that would end up in the school because they tested better than everyone else, and so they're basically getting rid of the merit-based testing to make it lottery, which of course is going to hurt Asian Americans, and they're completely getting rid of merit. Now that's also happening here in Loudon Academies. It's happening in San Francisco. It's happening all over the country, where this general kind of creep against merit-based education is really starting to tear down our education system. And then I think what you're going to have is ultimately people starting to go to private schools. I think you're going to start seeing charter schools, rising again as an issue in more of these places, when they realize like, what are my tax dollars going to? I've got kids on Zooms all day, and then when they go back to school, whenever that is, what are they going to be learning? And so I do think that I've talked to people in sort of national Republican politics, and at every committee, it's education is the winning issue. And certainly there's a long time until 2022, but in Virginia, there's not that much of a time horizon between our state election. So we have our gubernatorial election, our statewide election in November, and I think that you see it with the Republican candidates. I mean, they are just hammering on education every single day, as they should be. And I think out here in Loudon, we have an opportunity to continue to press that issue, make it, nationalize it. And, I'm trying to put together a group of people that will turn this county into a model for how to take back your schools.
Yeah, realigning those coalitions. You think about the Trump coalition. I think the border was big. I think blue collar union workers, not the leadership. I think he really attracted those people. I think more and more people are seeing like, what is this no border stuff? What is this? How about this one? What is this? Boys can compete against my daughter in schools thing. I mean, this Democratic Party has, lost its mind in a lot of ways, and that's what I mean about that radicalism. It's just, what's the old saying that being liberal? The definition of a liberal is someone who's so open-minded that their brains fall out. It's just like the transgender crap is just. Republicans are just dumb if they don't take advantage of that. I mean, hammer the open borders, hammer the I guess the open borders goes with the union workers as well. I mean, jobs is huge. I mean,
so I have sort of an interesting local story on my take on the transgender and sports issue. I played hockey growing up in Rhode Island, as a lot of people did. I started out in West Warwick, then I went to the Warwick Junior League, and there were no girls hockey teams at that point in time. It was like the 80s, and so we had our goalie was Sarah DaCosta, who later in 2002 and maybe was a gold medalist, right? Fantastic goalie. She was like the best goalie in our division. But ultimately, if there's no girls sports, it's going to be tough for her to get to Olympic men's hockey. Right. So that's when you start seeing all these girls hockey leagues. And what do you get? You get the United States being the number one team in this sport, gold medalists. I mean, fantastic. Right. And now you have basically biological born men that are now allowed to compete in women's sports. It's like we've gone completely backwards to the point where we created these leagues so that we would have equal opportunity for women and girls to go compete in high-level sports at the Olympics, professionally, et cetera. And now we're basically chipping away at that again, all in the name of this sort of equity, right? Yeah. And it's just, it's insane.
You dive into that, you can get pretty religious. Like, where are these people getting this, ignoring the biological markers between men and women? I mean, it can get, the deeper you go into that deep agenda, I mean, that's when I start thinking like end of the world type stuff. I mean, when people that you've known for years, like your neighbors or even your aunts and uncles are sitting there like that, and that makes sense to them. Like there's a political movement for this, at least large enough to get us talking about it. It's not so fringe. It's your friends on there, celebrating it on Facebook, like liking it and applauding it, and it's like, how did this happen so quickly? And I just think there's a real political advantage there if Republicans can, because I don't think stuff like cancel culture and is people really mocked. Why are you paying attention to the Dr. Seuss thing? Do you hear that? It's like, this is cancel culture. Meanwhile, we're 28 trillion in debt. And first of all, you can do two things at once. There's serious issues going on the economic front and things like that. But cancel culture is, first of all, politics is downstream from culture. And religion undergirds culture. So when you have to fight these things, maybe it's on the local level, but I think the RNC has to just really point out where all this craziness is coming from, because that's another thing I say all the time is that, man, my friends don't connect the dots. Like, you'll have a conversation with them, a beer out on the porch, and they'll be laughing at the transgender stuff and the boys in the girls' bathrooms and how ridiculous this all is, Dr. Seuss. So we'll follow. Who are these people who are advancing that? What party are they advancing themselves through? Look at the elected Democrats who are advancing legislation that'll change your life and affect your daughter. Like, haha, we're all laughing about it, but why aren't you a Republican yet?
Yeah, and you know, I think I have this interesting theory on Ron DeSantis and what he's doing in Florida, right? I mean, he has not bowed down to the woke mob or the COVID paranoia in Florida. And those are, you know, usually what you have is you get a Republican governor elected in a state like New Hampshire or some other place. And they do a bunch of things with the economy. They make the economy great. They run on the economy. They get reelected. They talk about how great the economy is. And then what happens? You get all the people from Massachusetts being like, well, the economy is great there. Taxes are low. Taxes are high here. And they move to New Hampshire and then they vote Democrat. Yeah. And then they turn the state Democrat, and all the stuff that they went there for is now rolled back. But DeSantis is doing it differently, right? He's going out there and he's saying, look, I'm going to fight this culture war. I'm going to fight this culture war, and I'm going to make this a national magnet for people that are just sick of this crap, right? And so you're not going to get, you know, these leftists moving to Florida because they're going to say, hey, people are crazy there with the, you know, they let people on the beaches and he's getting rid of critical race theory in schools. But, you know, conservatives and traditional liberals are probably going to say, you know what, seems like a good place to go. And they're going to go and they're not going to bring their, you know, raise tax mentality there. And it's really just going to make Florida more red. It's going to make DeSantis more popular, and he's going to create a destination state for people. Yeah. And so he's doing it very differently, and he's been amazingly successful.
Yeah, you have to make Democrats answer for the cancel culture, answer for this radicalism in their party, even the global warming stuff, this Green New Deal stuff. I mean, you could probably list 5 or 10 things that are so radical that 85 to 90% of Americans would just scoff at. But and you know the Democrats are freaking out, Ian, because first of all, there are traditional liberals and feminist types that are coming out against stuff like that. Even, I think of Jerry Seinfeld, who was several years ago. He said, I won't perform on college campuses anymore. There's no sense of humor left. Like, these people are race obsessed. You can't tell a joke that might offend. I mean, you just go back 10 or 20 years and the things that comedians were allowed to say and become real popular liberal icons for it. Like, that is no more. Seinfeld is the next thing to get canceled. But you can tell they're freaking out also because you see a lot of Democrats kind of circling the wagons around this cancel culture and arguing that their cancel culture is a myth. And they did this with political correctness, where they're saying it's just the free market. Oh, I mean, Dr. Seuss Enterprises decided that's up to them. You conservative hypocrites, aren't you for the free market? And it's like, it just reminds me of, they're trying to deny that this thing called cancel culture, this phenomenon like political correctness and cancel culture even exist. And they're trying to make this argument that, oh no, it's just unpopular ideas that we're going after. It's just unpopular books. Mr. Potato Head, that's just, people just want that gone. You can find me 2 people that demanded that those 6 Dr. Seuss books get unpublished, or Potato Head becomes, a gender neutral potato head, whatever the next crazy thing is. You can't find it. So they're trying to deny that it's not a result of thuggish liberal totalitarianism. And it just kind of, who's you might even know it. It's the U.S. Supreme Court justice that said on the pornography case, like, what's hardcore pornography? It was a free speech case. And
Potter Stewart.
Potter Stewart. Yeah, like, I don't know how to define it, but I know it when I see it.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure 99% of Americans don't care about those 6 Dr. Seuss books. Stop calling it the free market.
Right. Yeah. I mean, look, and I think that what's unfortunate is that a lot of people that are targeted for these things are probably pretty tolerant, right? I mean, look, I don't think that we should have transgender in girls sports, but if I were hiring and I had a business, and you could help my business make as much money as possible, I don't care if you're transgender, I don't care if you're gay, straight, black, white, whatever, right? Like, I don't see those things. I view things from merit, right? I don't care who the starting quarterback is on my team, except can he win a Super Bowl? That's what I care about. And I think that is the way forward. I think it's been proven that's the way forward. And now we're rolling back into this, let's consider, marginalized status in everything we do. And ultimately the result is a poorer culture and a poorer society because of it.
Yeah, and more division. And just to kind of wrap it up, what's going on in your school system in Loudon County. That's kind of the worst part of it, is that like you just said, I don't care. I think most people don't care, but you're creating so much racial resentment. I mean, I don't have any friends who are white supremacists, white friends who are white supremacists. I have a lot of friends who have looked me in the eye and said, I am so sick of this race crap. And that to me is like, that's racial resentment. That's turning an otherwise liberal, open-minded white guy into someone who is just so fed up that might say the wrong thing someday, might actually just develop a prejudice against a darker skinned person because they just, I don't even want to risk saying the wrong thing around him. I mean, I think your Jackie Robinson analogy was perfect. And I think at the end of the day, you're worried about your daughters going to this school system and learning to be racist, in the name of some sort of radical ideology. And that's just backwards. And we've come so far, and you're trying not to regress in that manner.
Yeah. And I think that another piece of that is, let me handle that with my kids. Let me have those conversations.
Yeah, teach my kids math. The sex education in the schools is the other thing. Like, why? Just teach them math. Although math is racist. Math is racist now too. I'm sorry. Why are we even teaching this?
And going back to, when I was a kid, there was this series of books. It was The Value of, right? It was like The Value of Honesty. And it was, The Value of Saving. It was Ben Franklin, or The Value of Courage. And it was Jackie Robinson. And I read my kids all those books because I'm like, you know what? I want to be in control of this message. I want to highlight, if we're going to talk about sort of race issues in this country and historically how it happened, I want to be the one that talks about that. I'm a history major. I'm fully aware of all the things that went on in this country and in other countries. And I understand that. Nobody's denying that, problems have existed in this country, right? We fought a war over it. But what I don't think we need to do is have our schools be the ones in charge of teaching our kids the values and the critical thinking that they should be teaching them critical thinking. They should absolutely let them come up with their own decisions based on their own, experiences and research and whatnot. But they shouldn't be telling them what to think. If the parents want to tell them what to think, that's their prerogative. And the kids will eventually figure out, well, either my dad's, full of it, or yeah, you know what, that makes sense. And they can make those decisions up on their own. But I don't need some, bureaucrats on the school board, 6 of whom are in this group, by the way, teaching my kids or making a decision to teach people's children what is right and wrong.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. You can tell. I mean, I've said this before on some other episodes that I'm convinced there was a clear battle for your child's brain. I think that is why, these leftists come out of the universities. That's why they go into the universities. That's why they go into media. That's why they go in. Now they're in the elementary schools. That's why they develop new curriculums, 1619 project, tear down the statues. You can see the project going on. And I don't know how anyone denies that this is happening. And I think on the local level, what you're doing, sticking your neck out there. I know you kind of enjoy it. I'm not even going to call you brave for doing it. I think you like it like I do. But more people need to just pay attention because they're coming for your kid's mind. So
yeah, and I think it's important to push back. It's tough a lot of times because you put your business at risk, you put your livelihood at risk when you go out there and you speak at risk of being canceled. But there are a lot of people that can go out there and do it. And I think certainly out here in Loudon County, this is a bit of an inflection point. They clearly overstepped the line, and now we have an opportunity to fight cancel culture, fight the politicization of our schools, and bring national attention to it. And then hopefully, the more we can do, the more we can impact the political ecosystem in Virginia. And maybe that leads to change in November.
Good, man. I wish you luck. DailyMalarkey.com. I finally signed up for it last night, and I'll direct everyone to that. And let me know if there's anything else I can do. Obviously, we're on the same team. So
all right. Thanks a lot, man.
Up there.
Sounds good.
All right, Ian.
Take care.